If you joined us for the February book club, we read, no, March. No, yes, okay. Hey there, welcome to the Pine Cottage. My name is Nicole. Today is April 1st and we are going to have book club. For the month of February, we read the book Digital Minimalism. For the month of March, we read Take My Hand. So we will be talking a lot about Take My Hand today, but I wanted to kind of keep this a conversation. So on March 1st, I talked a lot about the book that we read in February, which was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, and I did most of the talking, and then people did comment with their thoughts as well, but I didn't really have the opportunity to share those thoughts because people hadn't commented yet. So I think what I'm going to do is on each book club video, I'm going to start with conversation. What should we call it? Discussion, book discussion. So let's call it book discussion, where the first segment of our book club, we talk about some of the comments that people left from the previous book. And then in the second segment, we'll talk about the main book that we read for the current month, and I will just give you my reflections on it. And then when people comment on this video about the book that we read for this month, I'll do the same for the next video. I'll start off with I'll highlight some of your comments so that we can have a continued discussion about these books, and people who haven't read the books can get different viewpoints instead of just mine. I'm going to start with a book discussion about Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, which we read back in February, but I just gave you my reflections in the last video. So I'm just going to choose three comments. Some people they weren't able to get the book soon enough to read by the time that I talked about it, so they weren't able to comment on it. But I'm just going to choose three comments from people who did read the book. Text Stylist says, "Thank you for your thoughtful video. You hit on so many great topics, and I'm really glad you took the time to talk about the comment from one of your followers. It's so important to not compare where we are at in our journey to someone else's place in theirs. I too have a YouTube channel and Instagram, but I've always practiced digital minimalism. This also seems a bit out of the norm to others as I am retired from the IT legal professions. It's actually because of this that I understand the impacts of mismanaging data and how quickly it can overwhelm anyone. It may seem like a wonderful never-ending supply of chocolate, but it won't be long before it makes you sick if that's all you consume. Carry on." What a lovely way to put that, and so true. I actually took some time last week to just remove myself from social media. My knitting video was actually a few days late because I just needed a minute to not take in so much input. I think that's important to do sometimes, especially as the weather is breaking and it's getting warmer. Just really recentering myself and taking a breath. Sometimes all of this information is too much, which was the whole point of that book. So lovely comment. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave it. Another comment I received was from Lisa. She said, "I really enjoyed digital minimalism. I have deleted Facebook and Instagram from my phone, and I reinstall them only on Sundays. I don't miss it, and I'm trying to be more intentional with my relationships. Social media was giving me a false sense of connection. Thank you for the recommendation." This is really great. I love that she removed the apps from her phone, but she does allow herself time to go on them that has some boundaries. I do the same with Instagram. It is on my phone, but I do set myself an hour a day limit, and I have removed Facebook from my phone. I just find that it doesn't show me the people that I know anymore, and it's all advertisements and spam, and I don't even go on there. But I know that some people do like Facebook for the groups and that connection to other people that have a similar interest as you. And it's interesting that you say, Lisa, social media was giving you a false sense of connection, because I think that social media can be a double-edged sword. Here I am connecting with all of you, and it's such a blessing. But I know that there are times when you get so involved in this social media aspect and connecting with these people that you don't know on a personal level, that it would be very easy to prioritize these relationships over the ones that you have in real life. And for me, it's important to set limits on this as well, which is why, once a week I'll sit down and do this, but not at the expense of spending time with my kids or my husband. It's just being aware that this can be a good thing, and in a lot of ways it is a beautiful thing, but there's a fine line between it being a wonderful thing and then taking it too far so that it becomes something that it's not. So great comment. And then the Minimal Knitter says, "Hey Nicole, while reading Digital Minimalism, I started going through and deleting old emails that I had moved into different folders. I'd kept them for a reason, but I now realize that they aren't necessary to keep, and I deleted them. Instagram is not hard for me to limit my time on anymore. I left it during the pandemic, and now I'm okay with logging on a few times a week. If I start scrolling too much, I catch myself and log out right then. I did start putting my phone away in a drawer or on a top shelf during the day so I can focus on my kids' homeschooling and other things around the house." That is a wonderful idea. And actually one that I talked to my family about, just having a basket that we put our phones in from, 5 to 7 p.m. so that we can have family time and dinner together and just not have the phones as a distraction. And to be honest, I really do. During the day when I'm home with my son, I really don't even look at my phone. Half the time I don't know where it is, and my husband gets frustrated with me because he's like, "I'm trying to call you." And I either have my ringer off or it's just in another room and I forget about it. So I feel like that's a good problem to have. I just wanted to share some of that conversation surrounding digital minimalism, if that was a book that you read, or maybe you chose to read it after our discussion. Those are just some of the comments that we got on that book. For the month of March, we read this book, Take My Hand, and this is by Dolan Perkins Valdez. And this is a fiction book. It's a historical fiction book, but it is definitely based on real life events. I knew it was going to be intense just because there's a lot of things wrapped up in this book. We're talking about eugenics. We're talking about, forced sterilization. We're talking about racism. We're talking about socioeconomic status, education. There are so many different themes woven into this book. It is a very complicated book, and I think that this author does it beautifully. There's nothing overtly smacking you in the face, making you feel like she's preaching to you about one thing or another. She is just being honest about the events and the complications that come with these events, and what's the word that I want to use? It's uncomfortable. It's there are conflicting emotions. There are, I don't even know how to say it. Even now, I mean, we as humans are complicated individuals. We all have feelings about things. We all have our thoughts and opinions about things. We all have our experience of how we were raised in the environment that we were raised in, our socioeconomic status, the color of our skin, our education, and that is how we perceive the world based on that worldview of what we know. And when you are introduced to someone with a different worldview, you tend to feel very protective about your own, and you tend to be very defensive. You tend to be defensive because you feel like if somebody's saying something that might be perceived as negative about how you were raised or how you grew up or what you experienced, you need to defend yourself as to why you're okay or why you're not this evil thing. And I think that that's not constructive. I think that it's okay to be honest about your experience and who you have become as a person. You can still have the experience that you have, and you can still entertain someone else's opinions and thoughts without accepting them as your own if you don't agree with them. But having that conversation and admitting that there might be some holes and some gaps in what you know, because you haven't experienced anything. Nobody has. Nobody has this omniscient ability to experience everything from everyone's perspective. We are all biased. So I think that this author did a fantastic job of developing these characters so that we can kind of see into each one and experience their lives from their point of view. It's really fascinating because the main character's name is Sybil Townsend. She is a Black woman. She is trying to help a Black family. However, just because they're Black doesn't mean that they have all these things in common. She comes from a family who is more affluent and educated, and kind of pulled her away from, I guess, the reality of what was going on in the world to maybe protect her. But she was naive when it came to the realities of this family's world. And even though slavery had ended, they were still living on this white man's land, working for him, getting paid nothing. So she couldn't really relate to what their experience was, even though the color of their skin was the same. So, you know, when you talk about racism, there are so many different facets to race. And one of the big things, which I kind of touched on in the last video, one of the big things that has nothing to do with race but affects every race is money and status and the power that comes with that. She was completely oblivious to what their life was like. She learned very quickly that she had a lot to learn. So I just thought she painted that picture, the author painted that picture very well. She also painted the picture of the difference between Sybil's family. Even she was educated, she was a nurse, she came from, like I said, an affluent family. But then when they go to hire a lawyer, she's very much skeptical of the lawyer because he's white, even though he has done nothing to make her feel like he's this racist, you know, negative, terrible person. She has this initial feeling about him because what would he know about me? What would he know about my life, my feelings, this cause, because he's white? Not recognizing that she did the same thing to this other family. So I don't know that race is 100% the cause of these feelings. It's all tied in together with these other things like money and status and power, and it's all just complicated and jumbled in this mess. And then you throw in the government, who passes these laws where they play it off like they're protecting people when really they're just wanting to keep them under their foot so that they can control them. And that is definitely what happened with these eugenics laws. So I found, after I read the book, I dug a little bit deeper and I found this article from the New York Times Magazine called The Long Shadow of Eugenics in America by Linda Villarosa, and I will link it in the description box. And it is about the true story of the sisters that this book was based off of. And I just think that there are so many things that happen, maybe in all countries, but I live in the United States, so this is what I know, that happen within, you know, these rooms of government that will directly affect its citizens, and we never know anything about them. And the laws of eugenics was one of those things. I became aware that this was actually a thing, not in history classes, from TV shows actually, and I learned that this was happening to indigenous people in this country, that they would be sterilized and without their consent. And now with this story, and then come to find out that this happened a lot with people, women specifically, who they thought were promiscuous, or people with disabilities who had like mental disabilities. They would deem them, you know, unfit and so they would sterilize them against their consent or without their consent. This article was really eye-opening, and even though this happened, these laws were passed around the 1930s. For instance, it says in this article, from 1907 to 1932, 32 states passed explicit eugenics laws that allowed for the government to sterilize the insane, the feeble-minded, the dependent, and the diseased, all of whom were deemed incapable of making their own decisions about reproduction. Then, because of these laws, it says more than 60,000 men, women, and children would be sterilized under these state laws, which would then also inform Nazi Germany. And the Third Reich sterilized approximately 400,000 children and adults, mostly Jews and other undesirables, using the 1933 law modeled after legislation in the United States. What? I'm speechless. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say about that. And, you know, I was doing a little bit of like online reading, and there are instances where people are still being sterilized in prisons without their consent. So this is something where, you know, what happened to the individual rights of a person? I mean, I know that there are a lot of complicated stories in the world, but this book, this, you know, particular story is one that should have never happened, and the fact that it happened to so many people, children, is just, it makes me kind of nauseous. I think it is definitely interesting, going back to what I was saying about the different points of view of the characters. I love that the main character's name is Civil, because when you look up the word civil, it's of or relating to the individual is one definition, and then another is polite or courteous. So she definitely is trying to help these individual people to stand up for themselves and to bring themselves up and to not be under the foot of the white man. But in doing so, she brings them to another set of difficulties, bringing them under the foot of the government, because they're living in this government-run housing and under this government-run clinic. And of course, she was unaware that these things were happening, but they kind of swapped one problem for another problem. And she mentions this at the end of the book when Civil is having the conversation with Mace about, you know, they're leaving. Mace and his daughters are leaving. He says, "Civil Townsend, you done gave me my family back. Did I give you something?" And she thinks to herself, how could he ask me that? I had been the one to bring about all this damage. For years, I would wish I had answered that question, had given him a confirmation of how much our time together had meant to me. But my emotions were tied up in knots that day. And I think that she was feeling that guilt because she felt guilty that this had happened to the girls because she had brought them to that place. But she did it out of a place of love. She wanted to help them. She thought she was helping them. I mean, how many people can relate to that? You know, you think you're doing a good thing, and it turns out it wasn't such a great thing, but it came from a good place. You know, that ties into the whole conversation about abortion, which really is secondary, I think, in this book. Yes, she works at a clinic that gives women birth control. They do perform abortions. She herself, the main character, had an abortion, and it just really was so honest about that topic, because I have people in my life who have had abortions. I'm a nurse. I've met many people who have had abortions. I work with pregnant women. This is not a new topic for me. But every time there is this weight that is carried through the rest of the lives of these women with what if. And, for this particular character, she doesn't regret her decision. She still feels like that decision was one that needed to be made, even through the end of the book. But she carries the weight of that loss her whole life, till she's an old woman, probably until she died. So that's all I'm really going to say about that. I feel like the author did such a beautiful job of portraying that topic without really going in one direction or another, pro-life, pro-choice. I don't want to talk about that here. Like, everybody has their opinions on it, and like I said before, I'm not here to preach anything to anyone. I like honest conversation, and I like the way that she honestly portrayed what happens in those situations, because it's not you just walk in and we're going to do this and it's over. It's a big decision for a woman and a man. She also kind of hints on the father of that child that was aborted and his feelings. And I just think that there's so much there's so much tied into this book, so many themes that jump in, and that's real life, right? I mean, we don't go through our days and our weeks and our months just thinking about one particular thing. We have stressors coming in from all directions. And then you add, the internet and social media into that, and you're on overload with information and opinions and ideas and what you think you should be thinking or believing, and no, you should think this, and pressure. This author does such a fantastic job of tying all that in, and none of it is really resolved, because that's life, right? We just have to draw our own conclusions based on our path and do the best that we can. And that's what these characters did at the end. It's not perfect. It's not all tied up in a beautiful package at the end. They're just moving along, doing the best that they can, all of them. And this is the kind of fiction that I like to read. Yes, I like my thrillers, but I like when an author can make a story and make it real. Like, you could take these characters and move them into the house next door, and that would be real life, because none of us are perfect. None of us make perfect decisions. None of us have perfect thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas, and we all have biases, and we all have our points of view that are so narrow. And when an author can come in and expand that point of view and help you to see where others are coming from and walk in their shoes for however many hours it takes you to finish this book, that is such a gift. And that's how I feel about this book. Like, I feel like reading it was a gift. I will read whatever she writes next. I really enjoyed that. So those are my thoughts about the book. I'd love to hear yours, and I will definitely choose some to read in the next video. So if you feel so inclined to leave your thoughts and have a little discussion about it, please leave a comment below. For the month of April, we are going to read a memoir, and it is entitled Wave by, I'm going to butcher this name, Sonali Dharaniagala. I'm going to go with that. Sonali Dharaniagala. And this is a memoir about a mother. And I'll just read the back for you. It says, in 2004, at a beach resort on the coast of Sri Lanka, Sonali Dharaniagala and her family, parents, husband, sons were swept away by a tsunami. Only Sonali survived to tell their tale. This is her account of the nearly incomprehensible event and its aftermath. I don't know why I am drawn to sad stories, but I think sad stories really let us into the human experience. and just like take my hand. I want to know that I'm not alone in this humanity. Like, I'm not the only one who feels these things so intensely. And especially stories like this, if this mother can make it through the loss of her entire family, then we can make it through whatever it is we're going through, right? I just feel like it's inspirational and also heartbreaking, and it gives you another person to hold up in prayer. I don't know what it's going to be like. I haven't read it yet, but I just think it's going to be great. And also, if I can support this woman financially by buying her book, I'm going to do it, because I cannot imagine losing your whole world by a wave. So this is April's book, and I can't wait to read it, and I can't wait to talk about it with you all on May 1st. Enough of that and me trying not to cry. I posted on Instagram the next quarter book choices for book club, and I did post them also in a community post here on YouTube. But I'm going to put it up here right on the screen so that you can see the next 3 books that I'm choosing for April, May, and June. So I'm going to put it up on the screen now so that you can see the books that are chosen for April, May, and June for quarter 2. For quarter 3, I would like to have some of your books that are on your wish list, because I truly want this to be like a book club. I don't want to be like the dictator of the books and say this is what we're reading. I really want your input. And so what I'm going to do is ask you to comment below with some books that you would like to read for book club. I asked the same thing on an Instagram post, and people have been sending me some titles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in sections by genre, and then pick 1 or 2 from each genre, and then do a poll on Instagram. So if you're not on Instagram, please still send me the titles and I will put them in the poll. If you are on Instagram but you're not following me, I am at the.pine.cottage. Please feel free to follow me on there so that you can participate in the vote. I will let you know what we come up with for the 3rd quarter, so for July, August, September. I'm really excited. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Already some of the titles, I've been looking them up, are really fascinating. There are some biographies, some memoirs, there's some fiction, historical fiction. So yeah, I think that would be great if we could all work together to come up with the next 3 titles for quarter 3. So happy reading. I hope you guys have a great April and you get lots of reading in. And if you're a knitter, get some knitting in and get plenty of time outside, because spring is breaking here and that's what I want to do. I want to be out in my garden. So I will see you next week. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read during the month of March in next week's video, and I hope to see you there.